And of course, with these yellow flags, wherever Rubens in, and he's in trouble. I don't think he's going to do it.
No,
he's not. So Barrichello down in 13th.
Well, Massa's through, but he looks as if I'm sure he's got some suspension damage. He's a long way into those tyres, isn't he?
That'll be it for him.
I think he's fine in the cockpit. He's probably just trying to.
He's out of the car, but it's.
Is he out of the car?
I think so. Yes, I think. Is he still in there?
He's out of the car. No. Yeah, but,
he's still there. He's still there. Quickly, the medical car's arrived.
That water almost certainly would be water out of the tyres in the tyre barrier, not out of his Ferrari. And he's had a big lock-up down there, hasn't he? He's into turn 13. It almost is like he's had a stuck throttle or something, because it's such a slow corner. And I think it's 13. We'll have another look at it, but he's a long way into the tyres. I wonder why he's not trying to get out of the car. The problem he's got, although he's through to the top 10, he won't have time to repair the car. That means they have to decide his fuel load now and announce it. They have to declare his fuel load.
He's gone off at turn 4, top of the hill. And look, he went straight across the grass and then just carried on. So, the 5 cars which will not take part in the top 10 shootout: Buemi, Trulli, Rubens Barrichello, significant, first time the Brauns have missed out, Timo Glock and Nelson Piquet.
Well, Rob Smedley there, sitting on the pit wall awaiting some news with regards to his driver, Felipe Massa. It looked like he was using the radio there. We'll try and clarify exactly what the situation is here and bring you any news about the state of Felipe Massa as soon as we get it. But let's discuss that session, and you can see we're stood outside the Brawn GP team area, because Rubens Barrichello, after his outburst in Germany, goes out in Q2, first time this year that Brawn have suffered like this.
Yeah, very difficult qualifying session, incredibly close out there between all the cars, and the wind, I don't know if we can just see the flags there on the back of the screen. You know, it's incredibly windy here, which is the way the circuit's profiled. That's affecting the cars in lots of areas. So it could well be that he just wasn't able to hook a lap up.
And this is a very, very interesting development, because we all talked about Red Bull and Brawn coming into this, and the fact that the hot weather was going to really turn things around. And many people, Eddie, were saying if Brawn don't do the business here, they're not going to be able to do the business for the rest of the season.
Well, I was always sceptical about the argument about the weather. I mean, if a good car is a good car, we've heard that so many times. I'm sure the weather, it's the same for everybody. And Barrichello has proved it, that as far as the tyres are concerned, it's the same here. He hasn't done it. The team hasn't done it. I think they've lost some of their momentum and they need to get it back quickly.
OK, if you're just joining us, the headline from Q2 is that Rubens Barrichello has gone out. Felipe Massa also has had a big accident. We'll give you the very latest on Felipe Massa's situation very soon. And in Q1, Jaime Alguersuari, the newcomer to Formula One, in his first qualifying session, didn't even finish the session. He had a problem with his car and he stopped out on track. He starts last for the Grand Prix here in Hungary. Many people said it was going to be a huge ask for him coming into this race. It's a tight technical circuit, not the place to start, and yesterday he did over 100 laps in practice just to try and learn the car and learn his way around here. So he would have had a very sore neck, and I'm sure he's got a sore car as well. But let's hear from Jaime Alguersuari.
Jaime, your first qualifying session in Formula One, how tough was it out there?
It's always difficult, to be honest. It's like a free practice, they're always fast. Now we had 2 sets of option tyres. We did a quite good job, and then when we put the third set, we had a problem with the engine, so they had to stop it for security reasons, and we couldn't manage to improve our times. But I think to be 3 tenths off, Robert, it's not so bad. I mean, for sure I'm last. It's not nice to be last, but obviously I didn't expect more. My first weekend and my first mileage with the car. So looking forward for the next race, for tomorrow. Looking forward to finish the race, and obviously for the next weekends in Valencia and places where I know the tracks and I can be fast. Thanks.
Well, welcome to Formula One, Jaime. And many people said just completing the race this weekend, no worry about points finishes, certainly no worry about doing anything spectacular in the race. Just getting from start to finish is tough enough. Do you remember your first race here? How difficult was it for you?
Well, I actually crashed out of my first race here in Hungary. I was lucky enough to be in a more competitive car than Jaime finds himself, but I just got so tired halfway through. I went through turn 10 quicker than I had done in qualifying, and physically lost control of the car. So, you know, I think there's everything he's done so far, up until obviously the cars let him down there in qualifying. He's acquitted himself well. He's been within a few tenths of Buemi, but you know, you can't qualify if the car stops on the track.
And he's going to have a sore neck after all of his racing over the weekend. Right, let's have a little look ahead to Q3. Mark Webber was fastest in that session. We've already mentioned the fact that Rubens Barrichello didn't make it through into Q3. Do you think things are finally starting to fall in the favour of Red Bull, even at hot races, Eddie? We've seen them quick at cold places.
Well, I think it's emerging over the last number of races that the team really at the top end of the whole thing is Red Bull. And as far as I'm concerned, they're going to continue in that way. The strange one into the little mix is actually McLaren. And if ever Brawn were hoping for a guardian angel, it is McLaren, because what they need is McLaren to take as many points away from the Red Bull as possible, and that will be a good thing for them.
OK, well, let's have a look at the scene out on track at the moment. We're going to take you to some live shots down there. Of course, the final part of qualifying is going to be delayed because of this. You know the track well, David. Is a nasty place to go off there.
That is indeed. That's a fifth-gear corner, well over 200 kilometres an hour, and always risky to speculate at this stage, but there's a very clear 2 black lines as it runs into the barrier, which to me would suggest that he's only had front brakes as he's gone off the circuit. And once you go off the circuit with your front wheels locked, you'd be surprised how little you slow down when you're on the dusty part of the track. It doesn't look like he's even tried to turn the car at all. So let's wait and see what comes out of that. But that's very unusual to see a car go directly into the to the scene of the accident. So I would imagine there's been some sort of car failure.
And if you're joining us, we can tell you that Q3 has now been delayed. Eddie?
Just going to Massa, situation is absolutely clear. It looked, with the lines across the track, that it was a brake failure of some description. He didn't brake the car into a spin or backwards, which could have been worse in many respects. You'd rather hit that front on than backwards and snap your neck or have some neck damage. It looks as if his feet is trapped under the steering rack. Let's hope it's just that and it's just blocking, and he's able to get out and be with us for the final qualifying, although he he's not going to be driving that car in the final qualifying, and probably he's probably looking at tomorrow for this stage.
No, absolutely. Well, we saw the car there being removed from the track. That means that we didn't see it, but Felipe Massa has now left the car, and a lot of activity on the pit wall. You've been involved in some nasty accidents. What's the situation like this from the team? Are they just trying to get hold of the driver, find out how he's feeling? That, I suppose, is where the priority lies, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They would have been talking to Felipe, and hopefully he would have been making a transmission back to the team. I presume that we haven't had any playback of that. Then maybe his radio was disconnected or the power had been cut on the car, and in which case he wouldn't be able to communicate with them. But the fact that they're dragging the car away there, clearly he's out of the car. He'll be with the medical facilities that they have, and hopefully we'll get a positive update soon.
Absolutely, we'll make sure that you get that as soon as we get that. But let's carry on looking ahead now to the final part of qualifying, and a lot of people's eyes were on Fernando Alonso there. His teammate Nelson Piquet, whose drive is under threat again, didn't make it through to Q3, but Fernando looked blisteringly fast, Eddie.
I came in with Fernando this morning, and we stopped in this guy who normally takes little bets as to where they go, and he said to Fernando, between the drivers that is, as to where they would qualify, and Fernando said, without any doubt, pole position is mine today. And I thought, hey, that's a bit strange comment coming from him. And I said maybe he means 11th, which I think it's more appropriate, certainly on previous qualifyings that he's done this year. But for him to be absolutely categorical about it, I will be on pole. It says something. They're very confident, they're very upbeat, and maybe they're going to be there.
Lots of developments for Renault. There's one thing you do know: if you bring a development to a car that Fernando Alonso is in, he will get every last millisecond out of that car.
He's a driver that delivers, and I've said this before, I think it's just remarkable, given that he has won 2 world titles back to back, that he still shows the same level of commitment in a situation where clearly the car is a little bit inconsistent. And also just a word for Nelson Piquet. He hasn't made it through into that last 10, but he's actually only a few tenths behind Fernando, which under normal conditions would be enough. But we're looking at one of the most competitive seasons of Formula One that I think we've seen for years, and I'd be interested to see what the statisticians come out with. But it's so close. It's like a Formula 3 race.
Well, of course, that's one of the issues. That's one of the reasons why Nelson's struggling slightly. Those are David Coulthard's thoughts. Let's get Nelson's thoughts on today's qualifying.
Nelson, first of all, happy birthday. You didn't get the top 10 present you were looking for, P15. Is that what you expected today?
Well, I knew it was going to be difficult. Since yesterday I've been struggling a bit with setup on the car. Managed to get a good lap in Q1, but didn't manage to repeat it again in Q2. It was a bit of traffic, and I had my last set of tires. In my last few minutes I pushed a bit too hard and went a bit over the limit. And then the car is slowing down because of the end of qualifying. Got a little bit on my way, but it wasn't my best lap. I think if I could have repeated the lap I did in Q1, would have been better.
OK, right, let's get the very latest now on the Felipe Massa situation. We can speak to Ted. Ted, what can you tell us?
Yeah, the very latest story is that apparently Felipe is being stabilised at the moment. The light went on. The light with the G meter in the car did go on, and that's why the medical guys are just taking their time. They want to stabilise him within the car. His trainer and the Ferrari press assistant have gone with his brother Dudu, who is here, his brother Eduardo, gone with here just to try and get a bit nearer to the scene. They're just disappearing over my shoulder down to the scene of the accident. But that's all we have, and the only news we have from Ferrari was that there was no voice transmission over the radio from Felipe to the pit wall.
OK, Ted, thanks very much. This accident of Massa's reminds us of quite a few similar ones. We saw Michael Schumacher in 1999 injure himself quite badly at Silverstone. Heikki Kovalainen actually having a rather nasty accident a while ago. He ended up right underneath the barriers as well. They sort of had to drag the car out. The important thing to remind people is that these cars are designed to withstand incredible forces.
Yeah, and when we saw the car being towed away there by the trackside marshals, the front of the car was intact. It looked like the nose was still in place. Obviously the wheels and the nose were removed, as you'd expect when it's been buried in the tyres. But if we look back to Kovalainen's accident in Barcelona last year, the front of the chassis was actually broken back to where his knees are. It did its job though, you know, it protected him in the event of the accident. So they are meant to actually deform during the actual crash to absorb the energy. OK, now the news that we're hearing is that possibly Felipe Massa was hit by some debris before the accident. He was hit on the helmet with some debris, and obviously this comes just a week after we saw the tragic death of Henry Surtees at Brands Hatch after he was hit on the head with something a lot heavier and a lot larger than some debris. How ironic if this does turn out to be the case that we see two very similar accidents in the past week.
Well, it would be bizarre, and I'm still concerned if that was the case and it hit him on the head. Why then have the tyre marks all across the thing? He definitely had enough in his mind to be able to apply the brakes. And my feeling is, having seen so many accidents over all those years, I think there was a failure on the front end of the car, perhaps in the brakes.
David?
Well, again, you know, he's clearly pushing the brake pedal, attempting to slow the car down. There's no deviation from the line. He's going directly into the tyres, so you know it's always risky to speculate. But the good news is he was braking. He would have taken speed off before the impact.
Yes, absolutely. We can take a lot of comfort from the fact that we saw those brake marks on the floor. But it continues a very tough season for Ferrari. We heard the guys talking about it in commentary. Are they going to stop working on this car? Are they going to develop for 2010? I suppose in many ways, Eddie, if you were in charge of a team, you could carry on developing for 2010 and keep putting the updates on these cars, because F1's going to stay the same. So developing for 2010, improving this car, it's almost the same thing.
Well, they've had, just cast your mind back 12 months. They were in a big fight for the championship. And as far as I'm concerned, that distracted them at the beginning of this particular season. Massa, who was very unlucky to lose out on the championship last year, and of course the car hasn't developed, and now it's going on and on. We thought they were making progress about 3-4 races ago, and we thought, look at McLaren, they are floundering. The opposite has exactly happened. McLaren are absolutely at the front, and Ferrari are beginning to flounder, and this is a problem for them.
Stefano Domenicali, the team principal, has been talking about pressure and the fact that he is fine with the pressure of having a Ferrari team that aren't performing. But if there is one team that you don't necessarily want to be in charge of when they're struggling, it's Ferrari, because the fans in Italy are so passionate. They demand success. And of course, this all comes on the back of the Michael Schumacher era, where success was a given.
Well, indeed, but Stefano's been there for many years. He's been part of the Ferrari system. He was in charge of the Mugello racetrack, which is owned by the same group. So he's a lifelong Ferrari man. He understands the politics, and I think he's the right man to be leading that team at this time. Pressure's not going to be an issue for him. This will be the biggest pressure he's been faced. Waiting to hear, how his driver is after an incident like that.
And where do you stand on this development issue? Many people have been wandering around saying, are you going to do a Brawn? But in some ways that doesn't count, because Brawn did a Brawn because Honda pulled out just as there was a huge regulation change. There are no regulation changes now. So would you be telling the team, keep the updates coming, but keep 2010 in mind?
You have to keep developing the car now. There's no big regulation change going into 2010 as we speak, other than no refueling. Now obviously that's going to be significant, and the cars are going to have to be longer. They'll have bigger fuel tanks. It's going to affect the weight distribution. It's going to have other impacts during the actual race, as the drivers try and manage that huge weight variation that you'll see from the start of the Grand Prix to the end. But in terms of the aero surfaces of the car, then everything they do today is going to be relevant to next year's car.
OK, tough times for Ferrari. Tough day for Rubens Barrichello. He's going to start 13th on the grid, his worst qualifying of the season so far, and we can hear his thoughts now.
Rubens, just describe that qualifying. It's not where we're usually used to seeing you out there.
Well, it went. We had used tires for the first part of the qualify. Went quite okay. I was 7th. Balance wasn't perfect, but I'm pretty sure we could have made it through. And I was really hopeful because the car felt good this morning. Something broke on the back of the car because on the first lap it felt strange, and I lost completely the control of the rear end of the car. I couldn't control even on the straight. It lost ride height and everything. So I don't know. We need to check. Is either a rear bar or a rear spring? We need to check something. I lost something on the back end of the car because I couldn't complete the lap. So I was making a gap to have the second lap clear, but then the car wasn't there, so something broke.
Okay, well, those were the thoughts of Rubens Barrichello there. And this sort of brings us back to the fact that... sorry, just bear with us a moment. We are seeing shots of people looking for things on the track, possibly looking for debris. We've mentioned the fact that potentially Felipe Massa's helmet was struck by something. Is this a norm after a big accident, David, just to go around and double-check things?
Well, it's been so long since we've had an incident like this where we've been left waiting to get information that I haven't actually seen marshals out on the track like that before. So clearly they've been given instruction from race control to have a look out on track. I think that sizable debris you'd be able to notice from quite some distance. So the fact that they're looking so closely, I'm not sure what they would be expecting to find. But this is an unusual situation for us to be in. Actually, that particular corner, the last time I saw a big accident there was actually with Ralph. What might be the case, obviously we haven't had the benefit of replays, maybe the car has penetrated into the conveyor belt which is in front of the tyres, and that in some way has affected Felipe. But your point about how with the current regulations we're not able to test and develop on track, and the track is the final proving ground. You can do as much work as you like in simulation and as much work as you like with the load rigs, but there's nothing like being on track when the driver's hitting curves and the driver's running wide and really putting these cars through their paces.
Well, Sebastian Vettel, he's sitting in the car. He's ready to get going again. What effect will this have on the drivers, Eddie? What would you be saying to your drivers if you were sitting there on the pit wall and Jordan was still going? Is it just a case of keeping them calm? Would they want to know what the situation is with Felipe?
They don't want to know. And everybody knows the risk element going into Grand Prix racing is risky. And the racing drivers are now concentrated on pole position. And the rest of us, they're oblivious to it and they would keep their mind out of it and they wouldn't want to be asked. Certainly the drivers with me, we wouldn't give them that information because it's a distraction that they don't need at that time.
It's interesting because I absolutely would want to know, and I've been in situations during races when we've had safety cars because of an incident, and I've been on asking, tell me, is the driver okay, is he out of the car? It doesn't affect, or it certainly didn't for me affect my ability to then focus on the restart. But these are your colleagues, these are guys that of course you want to beat them, but ultimately you share a lot of time, you live the same lifestyle.
I'm not for 1 minute detracting from that, but a race is very different to qualifying, because this is a huge moment that it's something that they care, of course, about your colleague. That's not the question here. The question is that they're there to do a job. They know the risk, and for me and running a team, I felt we talk about it later. Now is the time to focus.
How would you get information from the pit wall? Would you be in communication with race control? Would Charlie Whiting be talking to the team?
Well, if it was my team, in my case, Rubens had a horrific accident in Imola, that terrible weekend in '94, and of course everything was dropped. The team would run, and I would go to the medical centre, and I would stay there until the driver, everything was cleared, and he got the full bill of health. And in Rubens' case, he went to the hospital. I went with him because there's other people. Ian Phillips ran the team while I was very capably and possibly even better than when I wasn't there. But so I think the team principal always needs to be with the driver. There's that bond between the drivers and the team principal, and that shouldn't change.
And it's a bond that was very important to the success of Jordan, wasn't it? You enjoyed that relationship.
I think most teams, look, if there's any heart in a team, it comes from the top, and somebody has to, it comes from there. And it's the same in a family. It's no different to a father father, a mother, a parent, or whatever. We know what we're talking about. In this particular case, I think the bond between a driver and the team principal is sacrosanct. It is the most important relationship that there is in the team.
Well, it's a bond that you once enjoyed with Rubens Barrichello when he drove for you, and I know that you're still very close to him. And we actually saw inside the Brawn garage a moment ago, there was lots of fuss going on at the back of the car. There was some marshals there. The camera was ushered out of the garage, and Ted has been speaking to Jock Clear, Rubens' race engineer. What can you tell us?
Yeah, well, I've just been trying to get hold of some facts in this position, and between Ferrari and Brawn, Jock Clear, Rubens' race engineer, has confirmed that when Rubens got back to the garage, there were some pieces of rear suspension, he said, missing from the back of Rubens' car. So he had told Rubens on the radio that he thought it might have been a bar. That's why Rubens said to Lee that he thought it might have been a rear torsion bar or spring or something like that come off. But Jock Clear has just gone back to the garage and confirmed that it was a piece of rear suspension missing from the back of that car. That's all we know from Brawn at the moment.
How large would a piece of rear suspension be?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a wishbone about there, but
Right,
I mean,
okay.
we can speculate. They're not saying exactly which, whether it was an upper wishbone, a lower wishbone, or an upright. We don't know which bit came off, but we'll have to wait and see. But that's the latest fact that we know at the moment.
Well, that sort of shed some light on why we saw a raft of marshals wandering around on the track, taking a look at what was going on there.
Yeah, I think it's more likely to be a torsion bar. If it was a wishbone, then the rear suspension would be hanging off. As it's the upright, the wheel would be hanging off. So it's more likely to be a bar or a torsion bar. And again, hopefully that's what's explaining the guys out there looking. You know, it's a piece the size of our microphone, actually, Jake. So it's a sizable piece. It's obviously got to take the load of the rear car. That is in place of the spring. You know, these cars don't have classic sort of springs on the back of them nowadays. It's a torsion bar.
Well, thanks very much to Ted. He's gone scurrying off again down the pit lane to try and get some more news for us. What's the situation now, Eddie? What happens once the marshals have been out on track? They've had a look for whatever part of Rubens Barrichello's car is missing. What happens next? And we can just confirm that we'll get starting at 15:10 our time, which will be just about 2:10 your time. And we can see one of the doctors here making his way down the pit lane, David.
Yeah, that's Gary Hartstein, and that's reassuring. He's one of the principal medical officers for the weekend, and the fact that he's out walking down the pit lane would suggest that Felipe is in safe hands, and we'll be hopefully getting some positive news. Okay, well, we can see inside the Ferrari garage there, Felipe Massa's, potentially I think that's Felipe Massa's car. If you are just joining us, Felipe Massa has had a nasty accident here. We're trying to get to the bottom of it. Something fell off the back of Rubens Barrichello's car. We're not sure if the two incidents are related, but we will get to the final part of qualifying very shortly as Jenson Button gears himself up.
Well, good news, I believe, anyway. Maybe a bit too early just to say, but we understand he just got quite a bang to the chin and just temporarily concussed, but he looks in great shape.
Okay.
So that's good news.
Where did that information come from?
I can't tell you that because I have my little spies here up and down the paddock, but for once this is a reliable source, and let's hope, fingers crossed, that that's the case.
Okay, well, just to confirm that that's what Eddie Jordan has heard. We don't have any confirmation on that, but as soon as we do get confirmation, we'll bring it to you. Now, I think we should really start to talk about Q3, pole position, which at the Hungaroring is essential.
It is, and what's just been confirmed there is that Eddie is a man of mystery. I never saw him leave my side. I never saw anyone come up to him, but he's managed to get that information. But this last part of qualifying, focusing there, this wind, I've never known it to be so windy on this track, and I think this is really catching the guys out there. We've seen some amazingly close qualifying sessions to get to this final part. Obviously, this will be with fuel on board, as they're expected to start the race. The strategists now are really, had to make some tough calls here, because for those who don't have KERS, you want to go for pole position, but if you have a KERS car sitting behind you on the grid, it can make up to over 20 metres between the start-finish line and the first corner, so you're almost guaranteed to be overtaken by the KERS car, and then you need to make sure you can be out on track longer than them in the race. So it's very intriguing to find out what the strategies are going to be in this qualifying session.
And I think McLaren will be possibly rubbing their hands with glee, because they're actually going to have a say potentially in the World Drivers' title and the Constructors' Championship, because they might not be able to win it, but they can certainly affect who wins races if their car is as quick as we think, and they've got a KERS button at the front.
They've got the KERS button, which I absolutely hate, and hopefully it's not going to be, we believe it's not going to be in racing next year, but don't rule out Alonso. He was a big surprise, and when I heard him so confident this morning, you'd have to think about him. If you were a betting man, you'd have to look at Alonso for pole position. So add that to the mix, add that to the McLaren, and where does that leave Brawn and Red Bull are right up there. no doubt about it, Brawn have a big task to climb now going forward.
OK, we've been told less than 2 minutes until the third part of qualifying. We've also been informed that Felipe Massa is very shortly going to leave the circuit in the medical helicopter, which is routine. Get him to hospital regardless of what the issues are and just make sure that he's absolutely fine.
Yeah, that's normal procedure when you've had a big incident like that. Ted made reference to the G light, which is on the top of the cockpit. That shows the driver's been through a very high G load when he's had the accident, and as a precaution they'll take him to where the proper facilities are. OK, so Red Bull are in the mix. Only one Brawn car in the mix. Talk about pressure on Jenson Button. He seemed like a man under pressure after the German Grand Prix, and now he knows that if he's going to do the business here, he's the only Brawn car that can.
He's the only Brawn car that can, but he has a couple of allies up there. He has an ally in Renault, and he has a couple of allies in McLaren. So things could be turning in his favour because he needs as many people up the front as possible with the leaders he's got.
Knowing what you know, David, can you pick a pole sitter for us? I guess you're going to try and split Sebastian Vettel and Mark Webber at this point.
Yeah, I think it's too close to call because you're seeing two different scenarios here. You've got Red Bull and Brawn are obviously looking at the championship. McLaren and Renault are not. Renault could just go light on fuel and try and stick it at the front, likewise McLaren. OK, right, well, one of the big boys has fallen. Rubens Barrichello will not be taking part in this session, his worst qualifying of the season. There's been a nasty accident for Felipe Massa in Q2. We'll give you all the latest on that straight after the final part of qualifying for the Hungarian Grand Prix.
The green light is on as we see Rubens Barrichello just coming. He seemed to lose something there.
But it looks like.
Yeah,
he's lost a piece from the back of his car.
The heat has collapsed.
Now we're going to see, the next we're going to see is, I believe, now watch this. There's a piece bouncing along the track. It's quite a while yet, and it clouts him on the side of the crash helmet. And there it is. Ooh, now, a big whack for Felipe Massa there. And then he's gone in a straight line. So the accident was sort of nothing to do with the car. He's still just about conscious enough to start braking. And I think he was downshifting as well. But he was, I think, just semi-conscious as he headed into turn 4. He never took the normal line, and he's sort of moving his arm there and waving to an extent. So Eddie Jordan's information is that he took a whack on the chin. Hopefully that's a precautionary thing that's going on there, taking him to hospital.
But I wonder where that debris came from.
It was a big tube, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was a piece of tube, but it was a long, it was 300 or 400 metres down the track from where we saw the piece coming off Rubens Barrichello's car. I don't understand why it was still bouncing along, because could we see a car in the distance? What put it up into the air? That's what I don't understand.